Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Pursuit of Ownership. It is Payton here, and I am here today with Alex Sharp. Alex, how are you doing
Doing
today?
great, Peyton. How are you?
I'm doing just fantastic. It's the middle of a Monday here when we're recording, and um, the fact that I'm not at school right now is kind of baffling. But I guess we'll take our small victories if we can get them, right.
Well, podcasting is better than going to dental school, so there's that.
Yeah, I don't know if that one would land too well with the faculty at school, but
Hot
we'll
take,
just yeah, we'll have that belief here on the podcast.
right?
Um, well, yeah, it's great to have you on the show today. I think it's been a very long time since just you and I have recorded.
It's been several months, if not longer. So yeah, time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah. One thing I will say though is we actually have seen each other recently in person. Took a took a nice day trip to Arkansas and was able to hang out with Alex. And quite frankly, I was really hoping he would take me to a local, a local restaurant spot. I was like, oh man, Alex, lives in a nice part of Arkansas. I'm sure he's got something local that just is absolutely delicious. And the best he could seem to come up with was IHOP. So,
I'm never gonna.
Alex, you have anything to say for yourself?
Yeah, I'm never gonna live that down. In my defense, I'm in the heart of the Bible Belt, and as such, it's difficult to find a lot of good local eateries that are open with any decent hours on a Sunday. So we had to make the best call that we could in the heat of the moment, and IHOP was it, unfortunately. But you left with a very full tummy, full tummy of pancakes on your drive back. So could have been worse.
Yeah, and I will say, so that was probably one of the spiciest omelets I've ever had. I was like mid tears halfway through the meal. But nonetheless, it's always good to see each other in person. I'm sure lots of you guys know this, but we really don't see each other in person a whole lot. So the few times that we do get to hang out together in person is definitely nice.
Yeah, it was
Um,
awesome that you made the drive, and it was good to get to hang out for a little bit.
Absolutely. Uh, But yeah, so the plan for today's episode is just going to be nothing too crazy, but we're just going to do a quick update with Alex just to see how everything's going for him and his neck of the woods, good old Arkansas, and then after that we'll kind of move into just our takeaways from Mastermind, both pre-owner and owner. It's been just about a year now, so we're excited to talk about that, and then we'll just have a nice breakdown of all the different offerings that we have. I feel like it's been a while, maybe not ever, that we've actually broken down each different offering and kind of who they're good fit for. So we felt like that'd be a good time to do that on today's episode here.
Sure thing. Yeah, so launching off with an update, I'm feeling a lot of the same pressures that most dental practice owners right now are feeling with like the hiring market being difficult, with the economy being in kind of a weird position right now where we're trying to figure out, like, are we in a bubble? Is it going to burst? Is this like a new sustainable pattern of growth that we're seeing in the economy? Because like I'm trying to find an associate, and it seems like most people want to be in the big city. They want to be around where there's a lot of good places to eat, Peyton, and it's it's tough right now to attract talent, and a lot of the businesses around me are having issues with attracting talent, not just in dental, not just in medical, but it's just an interesting time to be a business owner right now because you have people that are still able to subsist off of government benefits somehow, and the hiring pool just seems to be kind of constricted at the moment. So those are the types of things that I'm noticing, and from talking to fellow members of the mastermind, it seems like that's across the board in all states, in all regions, in all demographics. It seems to be pretty true. What have you noticed as far as the pressures that people are feeling?
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up because just a week or two ago we actually had the CEO of Cedar
Mhm.
on the show,
Mhm.
and he was saying, that's been one of the biggest things, even for his business, as an HR business, um, and it was really interesting all the things that he had to say. He feels like you almost have to get creative with what you're offering. Obviously more money is great, but just making it a really fantastic place to work, and them kind of having this perspective that if someone is to come up to me and offer me more money elsewhere, like I wouldn't want to take it because of the risk that I'm going to lose what I have here. And I really just thought him framing it in that way was really unique. Um, but at the same time, I feel like it's difficult to prove that through an interview.
Mhm.
Obviously for your people that are already at your office, it's great. They know what it's like. They know how inclusive it is, how heard that the people in the office feel. But conveying that, through 30-minute to an hour interview is a whole different story.
Yeah, I mean, how do you encapsulate your culture and your vibe at your workplace in a quick little interview? And like I've gone so far as to print out like a summary of like here's what we stand for that I have my office manager give to interviewees just to say here's our core values, here's our core focus, here's what we do, here's how we conduct ourselves throughout the day. And yeah, you do the best you can to convey that, but at the end of the day, you just have to make a judgment call and hope that the person that you're interviewing has values that align with yours. And you're not always going to hit it out of the park, but more often than not, if you get a pretty good interview process and you have a way of sourcing people, you have an open funnel that you use to attract talent, then you have your most number of at bats to try to hit one out of the park. But it's a challenge right now, and if Mr. Edwards from Cedar is having issues, the HR extraordinaire, then the rest of us are up against it.
Yeah, I definitely can agree with that. Uh, I'm actually curious. So, as far as your hiring process goes, what do you like to do? Because I know there's a variety of different camps as far as hiring processes, and is it all you? Do you get your team involved? Where do you sit on that spectrum?
I'm on the far extreme end of the spectrum where I show up and there's a new person and I'm like, oh hey, I'm Alex. Who are you? That's Yeah, so that's where it's gotten to because I've found that if I'm the one with my fingerprints all over the hiring, it tends to not go well in my
Hmm.
sample size that I have. And what we find works best is for the team lead for that position to be responsible for putting out a want ad, a Facebook ad, whatever the method is that we decide on, do the interview with our office manager and let them on and start the probationary period for 90 days. And then that's when I start to be able to interact with them. And if I see red flags, then we cut the cord, before that 90-day mark. But when your team, the more things like that, whether it's hiring or whether it's deciding which suppliers to go with, the more that you give your team leeway to make those decisions, the more ownership they're going to have. I think an important value to have in your practice is sense of ownership. And however you define that and however you hold people accountable to that is up to you. But I think the more ownership you can facilitate amongst your team members, the more hands-off, in quotation marks, you can be, but also the more that they're going to be engaged. And that goes back to what you were saying about they may get offered $2 more per hour down the road, but they might have a control freak as a boss, and they may not have the authorship over their day-to-day routine that they get at your place. So bear that in mind, because people want to be self-propelled. There's a book called the Millennial Whisperer by, I think it's Chris Tuff is the author, and he talks about how what motivated the baby boomers is not what motivates the millennials. And he's painting with a broad brush, like there's generalizations in there, and you could probably extrapolate it out to Gen Z too. But people want meaning in their jobs. They don't want to just go and suck spit all day. They don't want to just go and scrape teeth all day. Like there needs to be some unifying across the board reason for what we do. And that's where you can get creative as a business owner.
Yeah, and I've definitely seen that same trend kind of play out outside of dentistry too. Like for example, my fiance works in finance. I feel like there's only a couple letters different there, but anyways, she like has been working from home for over a year now, and I feel like for a lot of people, I know me especially, like I could never see myself working from home,
Nope.
but after doing it for a while, you're like, "Oh my gosh, like this is actually awesome." Like it allows you a lot of flexibility that you wouldn't have otherwise.
Mhm.
So although, working from home isn't an option in dentistry,
Mhm.
just having a job that gives you flexibility, I feel like that is almost priceless,
Mhm.
in, a job opportunity. And that's tough to portray through an interview.
It is. It's tough to portray through an interview, and it's tough to deliver on in our world,
Hmm.
in our purview as dentists. How are we going to have flexibility? Like, there's only certain ways where you can be flexible with your hours or with your job expectations or with the standards to which you're held. I mean, there's going to be certain things that are part and parcel with being a dentist and being a business owner and also having a team that works with you. But at the same time, I think it's important when you're interviewing people to build up the value of what you provide. Like, for example, you think about being at work and you think of movies like Office Space, where it's like so much wasted time and people are just hanging out in cubicles and there's just not a lot of efficiency. But people miss that in-person interaction, that camaraderie, that togetherness that you're robbed of when you do work at home. It's like you solve one problem, but another one can emerge with the work at home stuff, because it depends on your personality type. I think most of us do better in that team oriented setting, but yeah, there are those introverts that do value being at home. And I think people need to be honest with themselves, because dentistry, for better or for worse, is team focused, it's people focused, it's relational in nature. So getting comfortable with that aspect of it, especially as a pre-owner for the uh, purpose of this show, understand that you're going to be talking to people, you're going to be interacting with people, you're going to be getting hugs, and you're going to be getting yelled at. Like, there's the full gamut of interactions that you have in this field. So buckle up.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. I really truly believe that a lot of people, when they get into dentistry, they don't realize how much of a social profession it is. And I mean, it's true for pretty much any medical profession. I guess you could say not as much for maybe a heart surgeon or
Hmm.
something, but you're still talking to your patients before the procedure. You're still, talking to them after. Um, it really is one of the most important things. When it comes to, telling people what they need,
Hmm.
building up, credibility in yourself, and, really explaining to the patient, like, hey, this is what's best for you long term, because, they don't have that same knowledge that we have. So we kind of have to bring them up to speed in a relatively short amount of time. So,
Yeah, how
um,
you present it matters too, because you can tell them something, you can warn them of a possible complication, for example, but if you don't frame it in the right way on the front end, then they won't remember it, and then it's as if you didn't say anything. And whether you
mhm.
did or you didn't, it's the perception that matters after the fact. Like, did they feel like you warned them, or did they feel like you took the time to educate them? And you're not going to win 100% of the time, but the more you do it, the more you realize, okay, this worked, that didn't work. And that's with my associates, I try really hard to go through like a post-mortem of like what went well and what didn't go well in that interaction. Like, oh, I had a tough filling appointment. Well, what was tough about it? And invariably, I think a lot of it comes down to not so much the dentistry, but the management of the person attached to the teeth that you were working on. It's all that kind of stuff that sometimes goes by the wayside. And as you get into ownership, you feel like you're on an island sometimes, unless you're in a group practice, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm the only person having these struggles or having these problems. But in reality, we're all doing the same stuff.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Uh, I don't know. I might have to push back a little bit on the. Yeah, I mean, yes, the person is difficult a lot of times, but for example, I just had a class 5 on the
Hmm.
facial number 15
Ooh.
the other day that wrapped around to the distal, and I was sitting there. I was like, man, I, this is tough. Like, there definitely are times where the clinical part is tough, but
Yeah.
I would agree. And most of the time, it is the patient.
There's a 5-letter word that makes that easier.
I know. As soon as I like started and I like looked around the distal, I was like, oh no, like we
Crown Town.
might want to do a crown
Yeah.
here. Yeah, yeah. We're not going to get into clinical stuff, but it was a difficult decision.
Yeah.
There's lots of factors playing in, but yeah, yeah. Dealing with patients, and that sounds bad. Communicating with patients
Hmm.
is it's definitely one of the biggest parts of dentistry, and I know we talk about that a lot, but because it's true, talking with patients, talking with your team, all that stuff.
Yeah. And really, that's a commonality that we find in the mastermind, is that we feel so much that our energies are allocated towards patients, team, family, and it's tough to really go introspective and put energy into developing yourself. And that's what we really try to do, is give people a place to ask those tough questions and tackle those less than savory issues sometimes, about like team issues, clinical issues, like business issues. And it's cool to see people put their heads together and come up with strategies that you wouldn't think of by yourself. And I've really enjoyed doing the pre-owner hot seat session that we've had for the last several months, where we get someone who is in a pre-ownership situation, whether it's a student, whether it's an associate, and we grill them and we say, okay, what are you doing? What are your goals? Where do you want to be in 5 years? And it's interesting to hear that a lot of people have not sat down and actually gone through that exercise for themselves. Like, they've put in all the time and all the student loans to get to where they are, but they haven't spent the requisite 30 minutes or an hour to really get crystal clear on what they want. Because I think a lot of us are people pleasers in dentistry, and we are used to just going with the flow, making people happy and doing what works and figuring it out later. But it really helps to pump the brakes and think about, what do you want? What's your vision? Where do you truly want to be in 5 years? And as a pre-owner, the best thing you can do is just know that about yourself. And sometimes you don't have enough data, or you haven't done enough repetitions, you haven't done enough fillings, crowns, extractions, implants to really know what you like. But always be thinking through that lens, like, what do I want to do?
Absolutely, absolutely. And to kind of piggyback off of that, I honestly feel like the most rewarding transition or change with Pre-Owner Mastermind since we began was the actual, act of combining the students and the pre-owners together.
Without a doubt.
Um, yeah, because and I'm not sure if a lot of you are aware of this or not, but initially it was student mastermind, pre-owner mastermind, completely separate. They didn't interact with each other. And within the last, I would say, 6 months or so, we made the choice to combine them, and the results have really been fantastic. We found that the students that are willing to be in a mastermind group with people across the U.S. Are motivated, and they're really asking the same kind of questions that pre-owners are asking. And for many of them, they have the same amount of knowledge, if not more, as some of the pre-owners we have. Obviously, pre-owners have graduated, or so like people in the pre-owner mastermind that have graduated, they have more reps than students that are in school. But as far as business management, practice management, what to do in certain situations, we have students that are D1s, D2s that are at a higher level than a lot of people, a lot of dentists in general might never get to. So it's just been great to see that interaction play out over the course of the last 6 months or so.
It was a really good idea to merge the two. And to your point, I mean, there's some of these D1s and D2s that are in the pre-owner mastermind, just unbelievable amounts of business knowledge, real estate knowledge. They have such savvy like acumens when it comes to knowing what to do when they get out into practice. And then on the other end of the spectrum, yeah, you have pre-owners that were very, very focused on the clinical all throughout dental school, and then they get out and they find our podcast and they find our group, and they're like, okay, I've got some catching up to do. And wherever you're at on that spectrum, whether you're a student, whether you're an associate looking for a practice, there's value to be gained from being in that group. Because one of my favorite parts is when you have someone who's in the pre-owner mastermind who is getting serious about finding a practice, and they bring like, okay, here's practice 1, practice 2, practice 3, and they just lay it all out for the group, and then we dissect them throughout the call. Like, I could do that for hours. Like, that's so fun to do. And it's helpful to see things from other people's perspectives, because when you look at those practices, you're going to have, you as the person looking at them are going to have predispositions toward one or the other based on, oh, the seller seems nice, or oh, this one's only 2 minutes from my house. But you get a group of people around you that are objective and that just look at the the black and white of it, they're able to cut through all that and be like, well, you should consider this one over here because look at the opportunity, look at the hygiene percentage, look at the cash flow, look at the fact that you can buy the real estate after a year, look at the fact that there's 3 hygienists and the doctor's 85 years old and has been underdiagnosing for 4 years. Like, there's so many things that to look at. It's not a perfect science, but the more people, the more eyeballs you get on it, the better.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely want to touch on that point you said there. Just about having people looking at your opportunity that are objective. I can definitely speak from experience, and looking at opportunities that are actually for you is so much different than looking for them for other people.
Mm-hmm.
When it's for you, you really start getting excited. You're like, oh my gosh, like this is real life. Like this could be me in a series of months. And I feel like it kind of goes both ways. You could really look at the positives and be like, wow, this is going to be amazing. And then kind of put the negatives by the wayside.
Mm-hmm.
Or on the flip side, you could really kind of fixate on the negatives and not see all the opportunities.
Yep.
And like I said, it really goes both ways. But having people that are objective and that have a lot of knowledge around this topic on your side it's invaluable. There's really nothing else you can say about it. It's super important.
No, absolutely. And your example that you're thinking about was a practice opportunity that came across your desk, and it was easy to look at it through rose-colored glasses and say, like, okay, I can see a path where this could work. But then there were enough strikes about it that finally, after we went through it, you were like, okay, I see where it could work, but there's so many different things that have to break just the right way that it's not super predictable.
Yeah, I think that example that we're talking about, the one that I was looking at, was a perfect example of, could it work? Yes. And could it be, a good opportunity for me? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But is it the most straightforward way to get to where I want to be? Absolutely
Yep.
not. And I think just sometimes having that maturity, having that ability to, pass on what some people would look at as a good opportunity is something that's important too.
Yeah, being able to say no is an important skill that most of us learn a little too late, that it's important to cultivate. It's easy to say yes, it's easy to be people pleasing, but at the end of the day, no is a very important word. I have a friend right now that I'm talking to, that I'm sort of consulting with and helping him along, and he bought the wrong practice. Like, I've told him that, like, you bought the wrong practice. Too small. It was doing like 400,000 in revenue historically, 4 operatories, no real discernible hygiene base to speak of, very doctor dependent, like just kind of a perfect storm of not a great situation. The lease is really bad. It's in a professional building, no visibility, tons of competition around. Like, you name it, it's the antithesis of what we would recommend doing. And I just told him, I was like, man, you can either ride it out and keep fighting the fight and being miserable doing this, or like there's like X, Y, and Z things you could do differently to drastically change your outlook and change your trajectory of your career. And that's what you're faced with. If you go into something with blinders on without getting the proper opinions from colleagues and getting the right eyes on it, you run that risk of having to dig yourself out of a hole over the course of several years. I mean, dentistry, to be fair, is a very safe, air quotes, industry because the default rate is really low and it's hard to screw up so bad that you go bankrupt. But at the same time, if you can make the right decision the first time, then time value of money. Like, you can do well on the front end and not have to reinvent yourself after 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, precisely. That's a very good point. Yeah, I feel like there's definitely times where I hear about a situation where someone buys a practice and then they're like, okay, now like let's look for like someone to coach me or someone to do something. I'm like, just want to like shake them through the screen, even though I like can't, like if I'm like cruising through Facebook, for example, I'm just like, oh my gosh, like why did you not like think about this earlier?
Yeah.
And I feel like that's something that I always tell people too, whether it's, someone that's in our group or someone, maybe they know a friend that's looking at an acquisition. I'm like, please just like send them to the podcast, like send them our way.
Mm-hmm.
Like if they're looking at an opportunity, whatever it might be, because I feel like getting into an opportunity without knowing what you're getting into is probably the worst position that you can put yourself in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, granted, it could work sometimes, but majority of the time it's not going to, because you have bigger groups that know what they're looking for practices. You have people like us that really look into an opportunity before you get into it, and then you have I'm not trying to be mean here, but you have like Joe Schmo, like just down to buy a practice.
Yeah.
And they're going to be ending up with practices that big groups passed on, motivated people like us passed on. Like it's not a good recipe for success.
That point that you just made could save somebody 7 figures or more, about knowing what you're looking at, understanding that if something is on the market in a desirable area, chances are it's been passed over by multiple people that are either buddies with the broker or who are in the back pocket of that broker. So Heartland, all your DSO type competition, they've already passed on it. That's why it's so important to broaden your radius whenever you can and be flexible geographically, because it's just a fact that the bigger your search radius is, the more likely it is for you to find a really good practice, preferably off market. The off market part being the key, because with off market, you get first crack at it. It's someone who likely has not spoken to other potential buyers. It's somebody who might not have even considered selling their practice yet until you made contact with them. And I would say without a doubt that most of the people that I know that have made really good acquisitions, over 75% of them have been off market, because that's just how you find the good deals. And then you can easily play to the biases of the seller and say, you know what, I want this to be family owned, solo owned, not corporate owned. Like, you can really play that up and build value for you being the buyer, even if they could possibly get more money through corporate.
Yeah. That's such a good point. There's virtually unlimited benefits to
Mm-hmm.
reaching out to someone before they are talked to by anyone else, whether it's a big group, a broker, whatever it might be. That it really just, it's a no-brainer. It's, yes, it takes some time and a little bit of money, but in the grand scheme of things, it will be absolutely nothing compared to how much it could save you or make you down the road. So
Yeah.
Fantastic points there.
No, you got to front load the process. That's true with doing the off-market approach, and it's also true with, once you find that practice, getting it appraised, getting it looked at. And one thing that we don't talk about a whole lot on our podcast is our ability to do that due diligence through shared practices, through our PreOwner Services, because we have a department whose sole function is to go in and analyze your practice and not break the bank the way that you would with traditional means of going through and talking to a CPA and then taking it to an attorney, and you're spending easily 5 figures on that. Or you could run it through our due diligence for way cheaper and get a more concise, fast understanding of, is this something I want to pursue before I take a deep dive on it? Because I know people that have spent $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 evaluating practices just to find out, like, oh, this one's a non-starter, I should not pursue this one, the cash flow is not there. Or you could just figure out pretty darn quick, like, is this one I want to pursue? And we hope that through the podcast, you're educated enough to at least know, like, is this one I need to look at, and know the earmarks for success. But there's some that masquerade as good practices that really do warrant a deeper dive, and that's where the PreOwner Services come in.
Absolutely. Would you mind if I went and kind of dived in a little bit into what pre-owned services entails,
Yeah,
like
dude.
what the service provides?
Go for it.
Yeah, because I feel like lots of times we say, like, we have due diligence services, we have pre-owner services, but it's not like tangible. Like, you can't really tell what it actually includes.
Right.
So we'll go ahead and just dive into that real quick, because I feel like that's something I would want to know.
We get those
if I was
questions
listening.
quite a bit.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, let's go ahead and jump into it here. So it comes in 2 phases. The first phase is when you're interested in a practice, you've sent in an LOI, and you're like, okay, I really need to like dial it in, figure out what's going on in this practice. During this phase, we'll go ahead and remote into the practice. We'll pull data from their practice management software, and we'll throw it into a report. this report essentially gathers everything and puts it in a way that's easy to digest, easy to understand. And people like you guys that are listening to the show can easily see on surface like what's going on with this practice. And they'll have a call with you to go over all these details that are in the report. And this report includes like CPA services, so you wouldn't have to go somewhere else to get a CPA. It would be included in this phase of our pre-owner services. The next phase, if you decide to go forward with it after that, it's just going to help you prepare for ownership. So there's an HR component to that that helps you figure out, how do I deal with different staff issues? Is everyone getting fired and then I'm rehiring them? Just dealing with all of that. And then also credentialing, negotiating fees, and kind of determining how you're going to send a letter to patients informing them of the transition. So a lot of stuff there. And like Alex was saying, it is well under what you would pay for a CPA in a lot of different places. So it's a great service. And I remember when I first heard about all the different things that came with it, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is incredible. Like it's really just such a good service to people that are looking to buy a practice.
Yeah, at the risk of sounding like a boomer, I wish they would have had this in my day. Buying. Yeah.
I was honestly, the main reason why I had you on the show today was just so you could make a comment like that.
Yeah,
that was good.
So you could see my gray hair and make fun of me. Yeah, that's how it goes.
But yeah. Pre-owner services really are a wonderful thing we offer. In addition to the different masterminds and coaching as well. Next, I was going to say we could go ahead and dive into a little bit more of what PreOwner Mastermind actually looks like. How's that sound for you, Alex?
Well, that sounds great. I think with PreOwner Mastermind, it's morphed like the rest of the mastermind. It's been formulated to deliver exactly what people want. Like we had an initial conception of what we felt like would be the best for our clients, but we've ended up pivoting and making it even more amenable to what people are after. So with the PreOwner Mastermind, I feel like a lot of the value comes from the text communications and the Slack app that we have, where people share, they talk about practices, they talk about contracts, they talk about anything and everything, no holds barred, and it's all 24/7. We're getting notifications, and if you're the type that wants to sleep through the night, you can turn your notifications off. But there's basically no shortage of connectedness with that. My favorite part is doing the pre-owner hot seat once a month, where, like we talked about earlier, people come on and we grill them, and we make them basically defend their thesis.
Good kind of grill, though.
It's a good grill, but people come away from it with more clarity, which is my goal. Like, it's the tough love approach of like, okay, you're saying you want this. Why do you want that? Okay, you're saying this is why. Well, let's dig deeper. Like asking clarifying questions that people haven't thought of to make them really think, okay, is what I'm contemplating doing going to serve me well a year, 5 years, 10 years from now? Because again, we want you set up for success. We don't want you to be the type of client that comes to us, and we get these in the owner mastermind, where you're 10 years out of school, you bought the wrong practice, and now we're trying to do a reclamation project, and that's no fun. And then there's also the pre-owner call, like where everyone has community and shares what's going well, what's not going well. And tell us a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of that call, if you would, please, Payton.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, you touched on the hot seat call, and then we have 2 more monthly calls. These are all over Zoom, all about an hour a piece. Just depends on, how in depth we go for that day. But yeah, so one of the calls is going to be a monthly call with myself. For this call, I generally will ask the group, I'll just be like, hey guys, what do you want to hear about? Because at the end of the day, I'm not going to make a presentation, talk about something that people don't want to know about. So, I'll ask them, I'll be like, hey, like, what do you guys want to hear about? You want to hear about hiring? You want to hear about building a team? What is it you guys want to hear about this month? So I'll do that. I'll throw together maybe a 15 to 30 minute presentation. And so for the first 15 minutes of that call, it'll just be, intros, maybe updates, maybe someone sent out a mailer and they're starting to get results from it. We kind of talk through that. And then we'll go through that presentation. And obviously, people are welcome to ask questions at any point through that. And then after that, we'll just kind of have a conversation about it. And we found that this format's really helpful to kind of give us a direction on the call. And it's really been, it's really been well received by the members of Mastermind. They've really liked this format of kind of having a direction and making a presentation on it. So that's that monthly call with myself. And then the other call is a Q&A with George. So we'll have a Q&A with George once a month. He'll essentially just come on and answer any questions that people have. And quite honestly, I feel like the members of the mastermind might interact with George more than I do, which I'm a little jealous about. But it is what it is. I just think it's a great service to be able to ask questions directly to him. Obviously he has a wealth of experience and knowledge, and it's great to be able to ask things to him. So like I said, we have monthly call with me, hot seat call with a pre-owner that's looking at practice, and then Q&A with George. So between those three, we really have we have a good time. We learn a lot.
And as with the owner mastermind, our initial thought was, how do we deliver sufficient value? How do we give people what they want? And the feedback that we've gotten when we've asked is, well, we have so many calls and so much interaction that it's actually tough to stay above water with all of it, because that was our initial thing, was are we giving enough? Is there enough content? Is there enough to sink your teeth into? But what we find is there's plenty. And then if you miss a call, then we record them all. And then there's a repository of the calls to be accessed later if you miss something. So fear not if your schedule doesn't always coincide, it's always recorded and you can always watch it back later.
Definitely. Yeah, we've definitely had a lot of questions about that as well. And yeah, having the bank of calls has definitely been something that's been very beneficial to a lot of people. The other thing too that's nice is, so with the Q&A calls with George, the way we structure it is we just make a Google document that people can write their questions in, and then George goes through and answers them. So let's say you can't make it to George's Q&A call, but you still have a question you want to get answered by him. You can just drop it on that Google document. He'll answer it. You can watch the recording and still get your question answered. So
Sweet.
We really wanted to make sure that accessibility was, on the top of our priority list, and that people would be able to get, the value that they're looking to get.
Without a doubt.
Absolutely. Great. So I know we talked about pre-owner mastermind. We talked a little bit about owner mastermind. I know this is TPO, but I feel like talking about mastermind and coaching together would be a good thing, just so people can kind of look forward and see, down the line what is, I would say our top tier of service that people can, get.
Yeah. And coaching, what we're finding more and more on the owner side is that it's the vast majority of people benefit from coaching in some way, shape, or form. There's only a few people that we've brought into the mastermind that I truly feel they're pretty dialed in. Their practices are humming. They're good leaders. They run meetings. They do all the things that we recommend doing. And those are people that jump straight into the mastermind and do great. But far and away, there's people, myself included, that have benefited and would benefit from owner coaching. And like you said, that's our top tier of service. And for what you pay versus what you get, there's no doubt how much value you get, just because our price point's a little lower than what some of the other coaches are out there. And what really makes us different is the reliance on analytics and the fact that we're team driven, that we have highly trained former office managers as our coaches that come in and diagnose the issues and tell you not only what to do, but how to do it. The ability for them to see issues through the eyes, not only of the owner, but also of the team, really makes their teaching and their observation so much more implementable than if it was just doctor to doctor. Because doctor to doctor, I mean, with what George and Matt did historically, they did great and their clients made some major strides. But what they found as a shortcoming was the ability to actually tell the team how to do things that only a former office manager can do. And that's why our coaches are second to none. I've worked with them all. I've talked to them all. They know their stuff, and our clients, very high retention rate with them, because they just keep getting value over and over again. Because with coaching, you seriously can transform a practice within a recall cycle. And we've had multiple clients that have literally doubled their practices within a year. Like it's been pretty staggering, and that's something that we feel like if you do the things the right way and turn the right knobs, it's doable. So if you've ever thought about it, or if you're a pre-owner that is like, okay, I want to become an owner, but I'm really nervous about navigating those first couple of tumultuous months of taking over, and what if people quit on me, and what do I change first? What do I wait to change? Having a coach as you're going through a transition makes that so much more predictable.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Uh, there's so many things that you can't learn about a transition unless you just do it. And I feel like that's something that's difficult for a lot of people like us to comprehend.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, I've done all this research, I'm ready to go. Like there's nothing that can pop up that is going to throw me off.
Mm-hmm.
And then first day of the transition comes around and you're like, oh my gosh, what do I do? Like having someone that's done it before and can guide you through all these steps is again invaluable.
Yeah.
It's such a great service.
Well, it goes back to the front loading that we were talking about earlier. The more that you can do on the front end to keep problems from popping up when it's more expensive and more time consuming on the back end, you do it. Like you just figure out ways on the front end to make your life easier and to circumnavigate things that may pop up. And coaching sets up that foundation in such a way that you can get to where you can feel like you're coasting faster. Because I'll be honest, it took me years of ownership to feel like there wasn't constantly a fire to put out. And you can shorten that timeline for yourself with setting it up the right way early.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah, honestly, I think this was a great episode, a great overview of everything that we offer. And obviously, it's always great to catch up with you, even if it's not at IHOP,
I know.
it's always good.
Maybe next time, man. We'll tell them to hold the jalapenos next time.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe I just need to step up my spicy tolerance. But yeah, so between due diligence, pre-owner mastermind, owner mastermind, and then our coaching services, it's really just what what space do you fit into? And we really enjoyed growing our different offerings and being able to offer something that really fits each person, regardless of step that they're in their journey. So Alex, I really appreciate you being on today. And I'm sure we'll probably be on together again soon. I can't imagine that wouldn't be too long.
Yeah, let's make it happen, Payton. And thank you for having me, and good luck with the rest of your week clinically, man.
Awesome. Yeah, maybe I'll actually get into school these coming days. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for listening, guys, and we'll see you next week on The Pursuit of Ownership.